Welcome to the Gifts for Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women using their gifts for God's glory. Know someone who is making an impact for God's kingdom using their gifts, talents, and passions? We'd love to meet them. Send us an email at podcast@giftsforglory.com. That's podcast@gifts4glory.com. And now here is our host, Dave Ebert.
Hello, friends and neighbors. Merry Christmas to you this week. We pray that this week you will be able to celebrate with family and with friends, and that everyone is going to be healthy, happy, safe, and full of the joy of Christ. As we've discussed ad nauseum, this year has been so challenging. Let's make sure to break through that malaise and enjoy the holidays as much as possible, focusing on the true gift of the season, and that is, of course, Jesus Christ. In this week's episode of the Gifts for Glory podcast, we have an incredibly fun conversation with Christopher Sean Shaw. He's a filmmaker, director, producer, and an occasional actor. We have a great conversation, and he gives some very important tips for anyone who is in or looking to get into the entertainment industry, especially film, television, whether behind or in front of the camera. We'll get to that conversation in just a moment. Now let's dive into our Devotions with Dave segment. Luke 2, from the NLT version, the birth of Jesus. At that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for the census, and because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no lodging available for them. That night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them. They were terrified, but the angel reassured them. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David. And you will recognize him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth, lying in a manger." Suddenly, the angel was joined by a vast host of others, the armies of heaven, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and peace on earth to those with whom God is pleased." When the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, "Let's go to Bethlehem. Let's see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." They hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the manger. After seeing him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said about this child. All who heard the shepherd's story were astonished, but Mary kept all these things in her heart and thought about them often. The shepherds went back to their flocks, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen. It was just as the angel had told them. The birth of Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, coming to save us, not as a king riding on a horse, that comes later, but as a baby, born to a virgin. God came down to earth, was born a baby, and in the only time in human history, God needed the care of humans, because Jesus was a baby. But then Jesus grew up and took our sins when he was nailed to the cross. So if you think about it, we have Christmas trees right now. So we celebrate and we mark the arrival of hope with a Christmas tree. And then the hope, the eternal hope that we are guaranteed because of Jesus' sacrifice, that happened because he was nailed to a tree. So the beginning of hope is a Christmas tree. The completion of hope is a tree formed in the shape of a cross. And Jesus did that for us. God did that for us. So I hope that you'll take time this holiday season, read the full story of the gospel. Pick a gospel, any one of them. But remember what we're celebrating. We're celebrating the beginning of the hope. The completion of the hope happens on Easter, when Jesus is crucified, he's dead, he's buried, and then he rises again. That is the completion of the hope, of the salvation that God has given us to restore the relationship between us and him. Remember, on Easter, the veil in the temple is torn from top to bottom because God started the reconciliation process down to us. And it all started when a baby was wrapped snugly in strips of cloth and laid in a manger, the most humble and possibly most embarrassing way for a family to give birth to their firstborn in some stranger's barn, basically. But that was the humility that God, through Jesus, showed, willing to reconcile us to him. Don't waste that gift. That's the most important gift of the Christmas season, is Jesus. Don't waste it, don't miss it, and don't misuse it. Don't underappreciate it. I hope that this Christmas season that you remember what those first letters in Christmas mean. Christ, Christ, Jesus the Christ. So Merry Christmas. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. And this is the end of the Devotions with Dave segment for this week. Now, this week on the Gifts of Glory podcast, we are joined again, filmmaker, director, producer, Christopher Sean Shaw, who is also host of the appropriately named Sean Shaw Show, which I can only get correct here while I am scripted. In the interview, as you'll hear, not so much success getting that show name right, but that's okay. You can check out his work on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/CSS301. Again, youtube.com/CSS301. The link to his channel is in the show notes, as well as all his other Facebook and social media links. You can look on various faith-based look on various faith-based streaming services for his films like Skip Listening, starring the incredibly funny comedian and current full-time pastor Thor Ramsey. You can also check out his film Wireless. It's a short film. You can also see his work in the forthcoming productions of Church People and then Something Smells Funny. And we'll all dive into these through our conversation. We thank you so much for joining us on the Gifts of Glory podcast. And we welcome Christopher Sean Shaw as we celebrate and promote men and women using their gifts for God's glory. We are now joined by filmmaker, director, and producer Christopher Sean Shaw, who is also host of the appropriately named Christopher Sean Show. That's a tongue twister. I've seen that a few times. And you can see his work on YouTube. The link is in the show notes to his channel. You can also look on various faith-based streaming services like the Creative Motion Network for films like his Skip Listening, which is a short. We'll talk about that a little bit, starring Thor Ramsey. And then also his film Wireless, which is also on the Creative Motion Network. You can see his forthcoming work, Church People. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then also Something Smells Funny, all of which we're going to dive into during our conversation. So please welcome to the Gifts for Glory podcast, Christopher Sean Shaw. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Dave. And slight correction, it's the Sean Shaw Show. for the Facebook Live. Say that 5 times fast. Go ahead, try it.
That 5 times fast.
Yeah, nice. Very few people catch that, but yeah, it's the Sean Shaw Show, and actually, it's been on hiatus. Hopefully, by the time your audience hears this, it'll be back up and running again. But we were in the midst of evacuation for dangerous fires close by, and basically, I haven't picked it up again since that week. I've basically just been showing replays here and there. But hopefully, the Sean Shaw Show will be back in action relatively soon.
Sounds great. Now, with those fires, update, how are things? Are you back home? Are everything safe? Or are you still rebuilding, cleaning up?
Yes, we are back home. We weren't gone that long, actually. So our city has different zones, and it was the zone next to us that was relatively close, but it was the zone next to us that had a mandatory evacuation. But of course, there was all the smoke and stuff and ash in the air. So we decided to basically evacuate a couple hours away. We have relatives nearby there, but we stayed in a hotel that we've stayed at before. And we were only there for like a couple of nights, and then we were able to come back. But, electric was out while we were, that was part of the reason of voluntary evacuating. And the fires were just dangerously close. The wacky thing is, Dave, we've lived in this apartment for like 8 years, I think, 8.5 or so years. And the first few years, like, there weren't wildfires that close. Mm-hmm. But then starting in 2017, thus far, God willing, that won't be the case going forward. But starting in 2017, that was when, we evacuated for the first time, and we literally didn't know whether or not we were going to come back to our place because we were surrounded by, I think, 3 fires that were dangerously close. They were like a couple of miles away. And so but even if the fires don't make it, there's still the smoke and the ash, and it's super unhealthy. And, we have a dog that needs to go out multiple times a day. And so yeah.
The rest of the nation got caught up in the election right about September and in October, obviously. So we haven't heard. So are the fires out? Or is there anything still burning? What's the status out there?
As far as I know, those fires that we evacuated as a result of, I think they are out at the very least. As far as I know, they're contained, but I'm pretty sure they're out. I'm not even sure we're dealing with the smoke from it anymore. At least I don't notice it. But even when we came back, there was still definitely smoke, and they were starting, I think, to get control of it when it came back, and then it was increasingly more and more contained. So I think those specific fires were taken care of. But yeah, it's been cray-cray with the whole fire situation for the past few years. It's like every year since 2017 so far, they've been more preemptive with the power outages and stuff. They do planned power outages when they see a high winds forecast, because that fire in 2017, if I understand the story correctly, and I remember the winds that day, they were really strong. And if I understand correctly, one of the fires at least was caused by a downed power line. Mm. And so they've been really taking that seriously since. And so it's not been uncommon at all for multiple times per year. Red flag warning, and it come close to the October season, it's like red flag warning, and like, you could be out of power and of course they don't know, and it could change, but it's been probably at least anywhere from 2 to 6 times a year since 2017 that there's at least been a power outage as a preemptive measure to avoid a potential wildfire.
So as we've established, you're out in California. You're a filmmaker. That's where all films are seemingly made. Did you go to California to do filmmaking, or is that where you're from and you just kind of walked into that genre?
I actually grew up in Ohio, and I had stars in my eyes, and I really wanted to be a quote-unquote movie star. So when I went to college, my major was in acting. I went to Otterbein College. It's now Otterbein University in Westerville, Ohio, which is really close to Columbus, and was a Bachelor of Fine Arts theater performance major. And then several months later, I moved out to California, Southern California first, late 1994. And I still wanted to be an actor in film specifically. However, I was really lackadaisical about my pursuit of it. I knew I could do it. I just wasn't super motivated. Mm. And then, long story short, over the years, I just found myself more and more behind the camera. I started tinkering with shooting stuff when I was in high school. But, in college, I learned how to do editing on a on what they called a half-inch cut-to-cut system. It's basically a VHS cut-to-cut system. So I learned how to do like the basics of editing on that system, and then of course over the years non-linear editing. So I just found myself enjoying being more and more behind the camera, and so now my career passion is filmmaking behind the scenes more so than in front of the camera. Every once in a while I'll go in front of the camera, but it's not a passion like it used to be.
Yeah. So I know that you did make a kind of a brief appearance in Skip Listening. As
you recognize me.
Yeah.
under the mullet.
Which is a good look. And it also, now that I know you're from Ohio, I now understand it.
Yeah. Well, funny story with that mullet. I actually got that mullet. So now I live in Northern California. So in 2001, I relocated from Southern California to Northern California because I was involved in a ministry at the time that relocated. However, I got that mullet because there was a lip sync contest at one of the church gatherings that I had attended for people around my age. They had a lip sync contest, and one of the other guys let me borrow that mullet. And then he let me keep it because I did. My lip sync was I did a couple of them, and one of them was Billy Ray. It was a parody. It was a Weird Al Yankovic parody of Billy Ray Cyrus's "Achy Breaky Heart."
Yeah.
And I think it's called "Achy Breaky Song" or something like that. And it's a hilarious parody. And so I wore that mullet wig for that, and my friend let me keep it. And so I've done appearances as this character called Billy Bob in a few really wacky shorts. My brother in Ohio hates the character. My wife isn't a fan. My daughter loves it. So it's one of those mixed bags. Like some people love it, some people hate it. So every once in a while I pull out the Billy Bob hairdo, and Skip Listening was one of those opportunities to do that.
Are there other things that you've done as an actor that maybe we might have seen you in, or has it been all maybe local stuff through college and whatnot?
Yeah, when I first moved to Southern California from Ohio, I got into extra work over the years, kind of off and on. I had other like odd jobs and stuff too, but I did a lot of extra work in TV, movie, films. So every once in a while, I was featured like. There's a spot where you can see me front and center in Man on the Moon with Jim Carrey? Man in the Moon, yeah. Man on the Moon. I'm in the Carnegie Hall scene where he collapses and the Indians do the dance around him, and there's audience reactions. I'm one of the audience reactions for like 2 seconds on the screen. And I was in TV shows where, like, if you blink, you would have missed me. Like I was in a couple episodes of Seinfeld, and so I did a lot of extra work in TV, movies, music videos, and every once in a while you get featured, but not always. And then on one shoot, you might have seen me in this. There was a Toyota Tacoma truck commercial, and the commercial was called Family Reunion. I was booked for 3 days as an extra, and on the first day, I was put in a position where they decided to upgrade me to a principal character, and I actually had lines. I got residuals. It was a sweet deal. And it was supposed to air during Monday Night Football, but that ended up not happening. So I think it ended up airing on cable for like several months, and then it went to the internet. But if you go to YouTube, somebody uploaded it on YouTube somewhere, and if you just type in Toyota Tacoma Family Reunion, I think you'll find it. I wear like this pale yellow shirt, and I had more hair then, and glasses, but I had lines, and I was actually featured in that commercial more than people they hired to like fly out from New York or whatever to have a principal role in it. So that was a fun one. That's probably the one I was, and that doesn't happen all the time. Like extra work is really easy to get into, but after a while, it just felt like I was in a dead end job kind of a spot, because yes, the anomalies happen. Yes, every once in a while somebody might be upgraded or featured at least, but it's it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah. When I first moved to Chicago, I did some extra work, and it was that crapshoot of, somebody gets picked, and then everyone's like, all right, you're released. Sign your thing on the way out, and you get your check in a few weeks. And you're like, man, I didn't even see the camera, much less be on it.
Yeah, I was on the set of The Net with Sandra Bullock, and I was there for like 11 and a half hours, and I sat in holding. That's what they call when you're on set and you're waiting. They call that holding. And I was in holding for 11 plus hours. They called a group of us to set once, but we never got on camera. It's like they called us to set, and then they sent us back. And then I ended up going home. It was a one-day thing. It was a one-day gig for me, but I was never on camera the whole time. And, you still get paid. Yeah. It was non-union, so it was minimum wage. So, after taxes, it was like a $35 check. But hey, it was better than making $0 that day. So.
Well, the one benefit that I found is that the food is really outstanding if you're on set that long.
Usually.
Usually.
Yes, there are the anomalies, but yes, usually craft services and catering is great. Typically when you go in, there's breakfast, and sometimes everybody eats from the same craft service table and the same catering, and sometimes not. It depends on the shoot. And it depends on the budget, and it depends on how many extras and all that kind of stuff. Because but yeah, I'm sure you've got some war stories from some bad gigs, but yeah, it was pretty sweet, and you meet a lot of really interesting characters being an extra. Did you not find that you met some really peculiar people? Yeah. And who knows? You might have been one of them. I might have been one. But really, I just got to say, for those who don't know what it's like to be in the industry, when you're on set, there is a lot of hurry up and wait.
Yes,
when you watch behind the scenes and it looks exciting, and sometimes it is. But you got to remember that those behind-the-scenes montages are edited together for the exciting moments. Mm-hmm. Just like a movie is edited together to tell the cohesive story, or at least hopefully it's cohesive. And so there's a lot of, from afar, it's a lot of glitz and glamour and smoke and mirrors. A lot, mostly.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But when you're actually there, you're dealing with real people with real issues, and sometimes real egos. Sometimes it's your ego, and you're dealing with real people. Yeah. They're just like your neighbors or whatever. It's just some of them happen to be famous. So yeah. There's a lot of hurry up and wait, and it's not. There's a song from the '90s, I believe. I forget the group that did it, but it was called The Angel Song. Whitesnake, maybe, I'm not sure, but there's a lyric in the song that goes, "Hollywood ain't paved with gold, it's just a trick of light." And that is absolutely true.
Absolutely. One of the hardest things two hard things for me was, the stars, they eat first. Whenever your craft services are like, all right, extras, hold off, let the stars eat first. So whenever food was taken before the stars got there, they looked at me assuming, the big guy has no self-control. So it was him. No, I haven't. No. So that was hard. And then also seeing everyone break the unwritten or the expressly written rule of do not talk to the stars if you're an extra. But you see people walking up like, "Hey, I loved you." And they're trying to go through their lines, but they're also trying to be really polite because they don't want to end up on TMZ for something.
Right. Well, back then, I don't even know if TMZ existed when I was doing extra work, but certainly the internet was relatively new back then when I started. But the other people that get to go first is the crew. So it's usually the cast and crew gets to go first in the chow line. And which that makes sense, but yeah, that's crazy that people. It was Dave.
It was that 6'4", 300-pound guy. And like, I'm only 6'2", and it wasn't me.
Fact check.
It was a lady who's got 4 of the breakfast burritos in her bag. Check that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was fun. You meet a lot of interesting people, and there's always like that the dream of maybe the director sees something and they're like, that's my break. Because it does happen from time to time.
And that does happen. It's just extremely rare. The odds are stacked against you of that happening from a practical perspective.
Yeah. You have more chance getting struck by lightning when they announce you are the number 1 NBA draft pick.
But here's the other thing to consider, too. If somebody is doing extra work or whatever, or they're thinking about it, you do have a great opportunity, especially nowadays when you can stay connected on social media and so forth and YouTube and stuff. There's great opportunity, just like at a networking event, that there's other people who are like-minded like you on set. And if you click, then you could potentially collaborate on something together.
Yeah.
And things are a whole lot. Now, not to make it sound easy peasy at all. However, things are a whole lot easier to get produced and made now than it was 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, because so many things are at our fingertips. And if you, Dave, don't have something like a Red camera, you probably know somebody who does, or at least know somebody who knows somebody who does. Plus, we have this incredible invention right now called a smartphone. Anybody with a smartphone can whip that puppy out, put it to video, and create content.
Yeah.
Anybody. There are some really popular YouTubers who use their smartphones. So, I mean, there's really a lot less excuses nowadays for, like, you don't have to sit around and wait for the phone to ring like you used to have to. Right. You can produce content yourself. And I like to tell people this: if people don't know you exist, they don't know you exist.
Right.
If people don't know your work, they don't know your work. Whip out your cell phone and record something and showcase your work.
Yeah. And that was something, I know that you know Laura May from Christian Casting.
From afar, yes.
Yeah, from afar.
We're definitely acquainted on the socials.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I forgive me, Laura May, if I'm forgetting this. We might have met in person once, but if we did, it was close to a decade ago.
Wow.
It was probably like in 2011 or something. But yeah, mostly from afar. We may have met once.
And I was just going to say, I took one of her classes, and she said that right now, especially like during the pandemic, when things are not open and going, that if all you have is your cell phone, then you have enough to at least show people who are looking for talent that you have talent, because they know the deal. They know that not everybody's got a studio in their home, but if you're willing to put forth the effort and create content, that could be your break. So
a couple of tips on that. It's super practical. Set up the cell phone nice and steady. Make it horizontal, not vertical. Now, if you're doing like Facebook posts or whatever, then that can be vertical. That's fine. But if you're submitting something to like a director or something, or you want to be considered cast in something, then set up your cell phone, a steady, static shot, no wiggling around. Make sure you're well composed in it, meaning the framing of the shot is composed. You don't have a whole bunch of space above your head. That's called headroom. You know, you have the frame at the top of your head, basically, and have decent lighting. And you don't have to have a fancy schmancy lighting kit or anything like that. Just make sure that there's like natural light coming in or whatever, and you're not in shadows. I mean, like, I've heard stories. Like, have you seen the movie Sleeper Agent with Leland Clausen?
Oh yeah, love it.
Yeah, funny film. So I heard stories about how they had actors submitting stuff, and you know, they might have liked what they saw, but it was hard to tell sometimes because like they just had poor lighting, you know, and they wouldn't submit. And again, you can use your cell phone, but make sure that the room is well lit. Make sure you're standing in front of natural light, if at all possible, or at least you got light on your face. But if you're in shadows, how is anybody supposed to see your expression? And then the other practical tip is just remember that when you're on camera, the camera picks up the nuances. So if you're overacting, the camera will hecka pick that up.
That's a good tip, especially for somebody that's coming from live theater. Like I come from an improv background.
Completely different approach.
Because with improv, you're in a poorly lit room, usually on stage, and you have people maybe 40 feet away from you that you're trying to get to laugh. So you may overact, overreact, overexpress.
Be too loud, overexpress. Yeah. Common mistakes. But even for people who don't come from a theatrical background, that's a very common mistake. So just remember, the camera picks up, minute eye twitches and nose twitches and curls in your lips, and like you don't have to overact. Just the key is look as believable as possible, and just think like, do I overexpress myself like this when I'm having a conversation with my relative? Not unless we're fighting.
Not unless we're talking politics.
Not unless we're fighting about politics or something. But I mean, just be natural. Be and so those are some practical tips. And of course, you want to have good sound too.
Yeah.
And again, if you're using a smartphone, the smartphone has good enough sound. The smartphone has good enough image, especially nowadays. Just make sure it's a steady shot. It's horizontal. And you're lit, like there's natural light on your face, or there's, so people can see you. And then, say who you are and what role you're going for. And that's the other thing too. Make sure you're going for a role that's actually practical and believable, and people can like look at how you look on the screen and go, oh yeah, okay, I can believe that person in that role. But if you, Dave, 6'2", we're going to go audition for an Oompa Loompa, that's not super believable,
No, they want somebody that fits the role.
Exactly.
Now, I could walk on my knees, but why are they going to cast somebody on their knees where they have to do a lot of editing, creative shooting? Well, they just cast somebody that's already short and that can actually walk naturally.
And of course, there are the anomalies where exceptions are made and things are written for a certain character who's of a certain race, and that gets changed because they love a performance or whatever. But again, those are not the norms. Those are kind of anomalies, and they're not as common as we might like to think they are.
Yeah, a perfect example is a gentleman that I had on the show that aired a few weeks ago, Michael Ocho Terreno, former gang member. He's all tatted up. And he submitted for a film called John Light, which is on PureFlix now. And they were looking for a Caucasian, big, muscular guy. But here he comes, former gang member. But the script was so much like his life, they said, all right, well, we're going to cast him even though we're looking for something different. They found him, and he did a phenomenal job with it. Do you know who I'm talking about? Michael Ocho Terreno?
I don't, not by name. I might know him if I saw him.
Yeah. He's a Hispanic gentleman. He's a Christian actor. He's actually a deacon in his church, and he's still got all his gang tattoos. He's got I think a 13 on his face.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got a really great story, and God is using him in acting now, kind of in spite of the way he looks because of the tats, and God is using it and putting him in places that nobody would have expected, I believe.
Right. And that's a key thing when you're a believer and you're on set. There are things happening every day behind the scenes that we have no idea about. And that's a real place where you can be salt and light if you're called to do that.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go to the hard part. We're going to dive back into your past and find out about your faith journey. How did you come to know Jesus as your Savior, and were there any influences in your life that led you that way, or is it more that God just found you in the midst of something?
So my story goes all the way back to the womb. Do we have time?
Sure.
I'm kidding. I mean, it kind of does, but that's a joke I like to say. Anyway, so I'm not, when I say what I'm about to say, I'm not at all trying to say I was always a Christian. That's not what I'm saying. But I always had this, I pretty much always, from as far back as I can remember, for the most part, had a belief that there's a God, at least. Like, so I've more or less always believed there's a God. And then I would say, I attended. My parents weren't believers, and but they did give my brother and I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me. His name's Jason. Shout out to my brother Jason. But our parents gave us the option, like, hey, the neighbor kids are going to Sunday school. Do you want to go? And so okay, sure. And so, we went to Sunday school at a very young age, and we would sometimes go to church, and sometimes my parents would show up and attend church as well. And so we were in the choir and stuff. But for me, I think I sort of got it, so to speak, when the youth group I was in, and understand, I grew up in a really, really dinky, like, it's not even a town, it's not even a city, it's literally a village. I grew up in the village of Plainfield. Shout out to Plainfield, Ohio, in Coshocton County. There's also a city, Coshocton, that was about 10 miles away. But I grew up in so Plainfield had a United Methodist Church, it had a general store, and it had a post office, and it had an elementary school. And you could literally drive in and out of Plainfield within probably less than 2 miles on the main street, just boom, in and out. So the very small youth group I was in like probably junior high years, we went to see a Billy Graham Evangelical Association movie. And typically what happens in those movies is the characters in the movie go to a Billy Graham crusade. And I just remember sitting there in the theater, and I'm next to some of my friends, and I have a friend to my right, and they're at the characters in the movie are at the crusade, and Billy Graham is giving his invitation. He's giving the altar call, and he's calling them forward. And I'm like, man, if I was there, I would go forward. And at the end of the movie, Billy Graham comes on the screen and invites the theater audience to come forward, and there were prayer counselors there. And so I remember nudging my buddy, like, hey, I want to go forward. Do you want to go forward? I want to go. He's like, And so I went past him, and I went forward, and I talked to a prayer counselor, and I was really concerned about something because there was something really bothering me, and I thought I was done for. And so we talked through that issue, and she prayed with me. And I don't remember specifics of the prayer or anything like that. I just remember that I left the theater feeling like clean, like a clean slate, feeling forgiven. Now, whether or not that was, I think that may have been my initial salvation point, but like, do I remember the next day after that and whether or not I had this massive heart change or anything? No, I don't remember the next day after that. Except for that overall, like, I probably shared the story multiple times since and been like, yeah, I remember how I felt as I was leaving, but my life and my desires and my dreams, they didn't like massively change or anything as a result of that particular instance. So I just sort of went on with life as normal. And then I really started getting serious about my faith after college. I still went to I was still part of a church group, and I was still attending Sunday school and church and stuff. And I got baptized when I was a senior. I think I was a senior in high school when I got baptized, or it was the summer after my senior year, something like that. I think it was the summer after my senior year. And so anyway, so I was still attending church and stuff, but I didn't really start getting serious about my faith until after college. And then when I moved from Ohio to Southern California, to make a very long story short, one of my first priorities was to find a Bible believing church. And I ended up getting plugged into the Church on the Way, Pastor Jack Hayford in Southern California in Van Nuys. So nice. I was there, I became a member, and I was there for a few years. And then, like I said, in 2001, I moved to Northern California. And so that's more or less my journey. It was a very shallow understanding of what it all meant. Because like I said, I had always believed more or less that there was a God. And I used to have these wacky thoughts. Like as a kid, I'd be like, man, why can't God and the devil just like make up and be friends? Like, why can't that, like I didn't get it. And so, but then after college, it got serious. And then, the rest is kind of history.
And that's awesome that you got the opportunity to go to this movie and you made the decision there. And it's kind of similar to mine in that I made the decision pretty young. I was about 12 years old, I think, when I made that official decision, but it wasn't until much later that it really became a focus of my life. And it's one of those things where God kind of gets you, and then you still kind of have almost like prodigal journey until you make faith really your own and really pursue it. And God's waiting there the whole time. So you move out to California, you get plugged into church, and you're out there to pursue acting.
Yes.
At what point did your faith become part of your acting, and now you're producing and directing? Were you keeping them completely separate, or was it always going to be an influence of your faith on your production?
It was kind of separate initially, although I knew that I was being serious about my faith. I was trying to be serious about following Jesus and doing the right thing. So it's not like they were completely compartmentalized, but I mean, I'm sure I may have auditioned for stuff or considered doing parts that I probably wouldn't consider today. Mm-hmm. So it was still a work in progress, but basically, so I got involved with the church on the way, and then, through attending there, even though I'm trying to remember, I don't think the church on the way was like necessarily a covering for this group, but I got involved in an acting ministry called Interceding Ensemble, and the seeding is spelled SEEDING. So shout out to the Interceding Ensemble. The leader of that group has died a few years ago, but her name is Linda Rand. And it was, and so I was a part of that group, and I actually was tapped to direct a skit or two while I was in that group. So, I got to exercise maybe some directing talent I didn't know I had there or whatever. And then I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
Well, just the journey of using faith and your creative pursuits, and and they started coming together.
Yeah. So while I was part of the Interceding Ensemble, I noticed that and in general over the years, I noticed that my heart was changing. And I believe the Lord was doing a work in my heart, but my heart was changing, and I was, like I said, over the years before, I felt like I was more and more interested of being behind the camera. It used to be like, especially in college, you're like, man, I wish I could be behind the camera and in front of the camera at the exact same time, because I love both of them. But over the years, that shifted more to behind the camera, and I became more passionate about partaking in that role. And then also something interesting happened. We talked about being on sets as extras. Something that happened to me like a couple of different times on set, where another believer would just kind of randomly look at me and be like, yeah, I kind of see you as a director. I mean, like, kind of out of the blue, and I'm still wanting to pursue acting. And so and like, I think one time somebody said, you kind of remind me of Ron Howard, but they would say something peculiar like that. That happened like 2 or 3 times, where somebody would just be, you look like a director to me, So there were things like that, and just again over the course of time, my heart, I felt my heart changing. And then as far as that also came to play when it came to like the types of projects that I would want to be a part of. I don't necessarily think I need to be solely a part of overtly faith-based content, but of course the content shouldn't be grievous to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I think, at least for the most part, unless it's just a goofy, clean, wacky comedy, I think there at least needs to be some kind of a redemptive element to the project that I'm in. And quite frankly, good comedy is redemptive, in my opinion, and much, much needed. And there's not enough good comedy out there. So I do tend to gravitate towards comedy. And that was another thing that changed over the years. When I started getting involved in the 168 Film Project, I used to think that if I was going to do something that was faith-based, it had to be meaty and heavy, and like the meat's got to be there. But at the same time, I'm really quirky, I'm a goofball, So even when I tried to do, like, my very first 168, which is on my YouTube channel, if you go to youtube.com/CSS301, please subscribe and enjoy the videos there. But if you look up, there's a 168 playlist, and I think one of the first videos in that playlist, or chronologically at least, was my very first short film for the 168 out of several that I've done there. But it was a meaty concept, but I was a goofball, and I was still quirky. I still had my quirky sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And I just, around that time, I was sensing my heart was changing, and I began to start realizing that there's a place for things like comedy with heart. And it was just 2 years later, we did Skip Listening. And that is what I like to say. It's a comedy with heart. It's an over-the-top comedy in a sense because of the way the character goes deaf and stuff like that. But it's also got massive heart, and there's an incredible message, and God is mentioned one time in it. So it's not even overtly Christian per se, but the theme is there, and the worldview is there, and the heart is there. So,
and it's unfortunate that there's so many Christians that are like that want that everything's got to be meaty, everything's got to be edgy, everything's got to be evangelical, and I'm like,
somebody has to cry.
Yeah, somebody has to cry. Yeah. If you can kill an old person or a kid and show the redemption in that,
and there has to be an altar call.
Yes,
I mean, okay,
no,
this is potentially going to blow some people's minds. Can you name one parable of Jesus that had an altar call?
Nope.
I'm not saying there's not a place for that. I'm just saying to say like that has to be this cookie cutter, like this is what a faith-based film is or isn't. It's a whole lot more nuanced than a black and white cookie cutter format. It really is. And if you look at most of Jesus's recorded parables, there is no A to Z presentation of the gospel.
Nope.
It's not there. So it doesn't have to be, and I think that's where there's a lot of struggle when it comes to faith-based Christian filmmaking, is there's this notion that it has to be this, and this. And that very notion with all those this, and this is usually contrary to the kind of stories that Jesus told. He still told redemptive stories.
Yeah.
He was still the Savior and King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and yes, we have to know Jesus to get to heaven. I mean, that all that's still true, but why did it become the story you're telling, whether it's a play or a movie or a short? Why did it become it has to be this format, or it's not a quote-unquote Christian film?
And to those people, I would say, does every one of your conversations include an altar call? Every time you talk to somebody, you order something at McDonald's, are you saying, now have you accepted your Lord and Savior?
Right. But also to that point, I have heard stories where there's a time and place for that. But
Exactly.
is that the norm? I mean, and again, do your conversations with your family like I used to think, like I would hear certain styles of preaching growing up, and this really confused me. I would hear certain styles of preachers growing up, and they go into the preacher voice when they're in the pulpit, right?
Yeah.
They go into the yeah, and all the inflectuations and stuff. And I'm like, do they talk like this at the restaurant? Do they talk like this at home? No. You go greet them after the service. They're not going, doing all the inflections and the "thus saith the Lord's" and all. I mean, they don't talk like that. So why is there this shift like that? So yeah, and that I'm serious. That confused me when I was growing up and very shallow in my understanding. I'm like, why do they talk this way from the pulpit, and then they're kind of like a completely different person afterwards?
Yeah.
Didn't make much sense to me.
And there, like you said, there is a place for the message and for the altar calls, but also there's a lot of room and a lot of need for things that are just uplifting, that are just, we can get the family around and spend 15, 20 minutes watching a short, 2 hours watching a full-length movie, that we don't need the gospel presented because maybe we're already saved and we're just here to enjoy something. So there's room for that, because the body is a complex thing and not just the Hallmark Channel, but with Christ.
Right. And I'd like to piggyback on that and say there's a place for certain styles and so forth, and I think that needs to be under the direction of the Holy Spirit.
More of the Gifts for Glory podcast in just a moment. Our host, Dave Ebert, is now accepting bookings for your next event. Dave specializes in improv coaching to improve self-esteem, team camaraderie, communication, creativity, and developing your own unique voice. Improv is an amazing tool to learn how to listen actively, respond appropriately, and communicate more efficiently, all while having an absolute blast. For churches and ministries, ask about our Improv Your Witness workshop, designed to get you out of your own way when sharing the gospel and your testimony. For information, contact booking@giftsforglory.com. Booking@gifts4glory.com. Booking@giftsforglory.com. We'll be back with more of this amazing conversation next on the Gifts for Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women using their gifts for God's glory.
There's a place for certain styles and so forth, and I think that needs to be under the direction of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Not because there's a formula. Like, when I present the gospel, I always do it this way. Did Jesus always perform a miracle the same way? Did Jesus always talk to people the exact same way? No.
One guy he healed by spitting in some mud, or in some dirt to create mud.
Yes.
He didn't do that for everybody. He did it for one guy for a specific purpose.
Right. And I was actually thinking of that example in the context of it was the same miracle that he had performed elsewhere, but he did it differently each time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's on purpose.
Yes.
And Jesus also said, I do what I see the Father doing. I think he even says, I only do what I see I see the Father doing. God, help us to see what the Father is doing. And I mean that for me. God, help me to see what the Father's doing, because that'll alter your conversations from day to day. That'll alter your interactions. That'll alter the projects you work on, don't work on. That'll alter so much in your life.
Absolutely.
And we all desperately need to see what the Father is doing.
Absolutely. So subscribing to your YouTube channel is one way. What is another way that people can support what you're doing and find out more about the upcoming productions like Church People and Something Smells Funny? What's the best way that they can find you or support you?
I think the best way, not just me, I think the best way that you can support filmmakers you believe in is to share their content.
Mm-hmm.
Like it, comment on it, and share it. And if you don't like it, find somebody you do and share it. don't just share it for the sake of sharing it because that's the thing you're supposed to do. If you genuinely like it, share it. Yeah. Because that's how more eyeballs get on it. That's how potentially more people's lives get changed, at least touched, at least seeds planted. So I would say that's probably, well, number one would be pray for me and pray for other filmmakers. Prayer is definitely it. But aside from the, in the supernatural realm, from a more practical human understanding perspective, share the content. And if you see a crowdfunding campaign, which I haven't done in a few years, but I'm ramping up to do a couple. If you see a crowdfunding campaign and you like that person's work and you can, even if it's $1 or $5 or $10, give to the campaign if you can. If you can't, back to the other thing, share.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the more eyeballs on it, because and there's even arguments and debates around this. So I'll say my piece on this. A lot of people complain that the reason faith-based stuff isn't that good is because the budgets aren't there. That's only part of the problem. That is significant, and there are reasons why we can't compete on certain scales to Hollywood blockbuster stuff because the budget isn't there to capture that same kind of vision. However, again, with the more and more technology, there's some amazing stuff you can do with easily affordable editing. But here's what I want to say to that whole argument. If you have a compelling story and a well-written script and a well-executed script, you're leagues beyond the biggest Hollywood blockbuster that really isn't all that good. And I'm not saying that all Hollywood blockbusters aren't all that good. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying there are some movies that I think we can both agree on, and maybe you listening, that that movie got a lot of hype, but it really wasn't that good.
Right.
If you have a compelling story, a compelling script, you have actors who are cast believably. That's the other thing I want to say about casting and acting. They're two different things. Casting and acting are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
You could have a really good actor cast in the wrong part, or you could have somebody who looks the part who doesn't act it well. So those two things are two separate things that go hand in hand. So if you have a really compelling story, a well-written script, and you've cast it well, and the cast are good actors, and overall the execution as well, the lighting, the editing, the music, there's so many things that go into sound is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a beautiful visual and the sound stinks, you're gonna take people out of the movie from an audience perspective. So I know I'm unloading a whole bunch of stuff here, but these are key component important things. If you have that in and of itself could catapult your film to be a very well-received film. Let's face it, some of the big blockbusters, they don't have that great scripts,
No.
Some of the writing is horrible. I mean, sometimes it's good. I mean, it's kind of, it's not just faith-based films that suck sometimes, or most of the time. Big-time Hollywood has this issue too, because the scripts are not great. Or in some cases the acting might not be great, or in some cases it's just a hodgepodge mess. I mean, right. It's not cohesive or whatever. So if you have a compelling story and script that is well executed, you're so far ahead, and you're gonna reach more people with that kind of content. It doesn't have to be a big Hollywood blockbuster thing.
Right. To your point, you look at the success of the Kendrick brothers, because they started with very little budget, but they had some very compelling stories. Yes. And that's why they're now producing things that are getting close to that Hollywood level.
Yep. Because
they started small and told really good stories.
Yeah. And the Erwin brothers. The Erwin brothers. I mean, yeah.
And we're also showing that there is now a real marketplace for that kind of content, because you look at the success of The Chosen, Vindication, all these other things. There's room now, and it's not that there's only so much pie. The pie is actually getting bigger if we do what I believe is that we serve a God of excellence, so we should aim for excellence.
Yeah. On the note also, how can you help? And again, I'm not saying do this just to do it, because some films, I mean, frankly, they're just not that good.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a film that looks good and it's safe, I mean, at the time of this recording, we are in the midst of a pandemic still. So be wise and safe as I say this, but you know, if it's feasible and it's safe and it's in a theater, go to the theater opening weekend.
Yes.
And if you absolutely can't do opening weekend, do the next weekend, because how long it stays at the theater has a lot to do with the opening weekend and or second weekend.
Yeah.
If there's no turnout, then it's going to come and go in the theaters. And so that's a major way where you can support faith-based films. Again, don't do it just to do it. Be safe about it. But if you genuinely like it and you genuinely want to get behind the team that did that movie, that's a very practical way you can support it. Go see it in person, in the theater, take your friends, and again, share.
Yeah.
If you liked it, share that and show a movie poster or something, point people to it. I mean, that's how organic reach happens. You know, because paying for ads and stuff when you don't have the budget for it is, you know, that's a financial struggle.
So as we're getting ready to wrap up, because I don't want to keep you all night, because I think we could talk all night about, you know, the film industry and creative things. I know that you can't say a lot, but tell us a little bit about what we can expect from church people, and then we'll also want to hear a little bit about Something Smells Funny after that.
So Church People is a collaboration with a bunch of people, starting with Thor Ramsey, who is nowadays a full-time pastor. He still writes. He writes novels, and he's got some published books out there, and he's hilarious. But he basically approached me with the idea. At the time, it was called Youth Group. And so, very long story short, I mean, I've been attached to this project for over a decade, so this is a very long story short. We did what's called a proof of concept trailer. So skip listening if you see that short on Creative Motion Network or on my YouTube channel. Again, it's youtube.com/CSS301. Please subscribe. That would be cool. But skip listening was my very first collaboration with Thor, and we've done several short films since. And then, you know, we were extremely blessed and fortunate to work on an actual feature film with an actual budget, with actual name talent attached. Incredible experience. But we started with a proof of concept. Shout out to Matthew Reitmeyer, who was instrumental in helping us land a location for that. And fun fact, the same location we shot the proof of concept is where we shot the feature.
Wow, nice.
Like 6 years later. Matthew was really instrumental in the beginning of that process. And so, yeah, we did a proof of concept. It eventually caught some people's attention. And again, very long story short, it eventually got funded and shot. And it, in a nutshell, Church People is about a mega church. He's known as America's favorite youth pastor, played by Thor Ramsey. And he finds himself caught in the mega church marketing branding machine. And he just wants to get out and get back to preaching the gospel. That's his heart cry. But he's in the midst of all this zaniness around him. He has a senior pastor who started out the same way, but then it became more and more about the show. How do we get more butts in the seats? How do we top the last year's Easter service or, you know, Good Friday service? How do we top it? How do we top it? I've been shot out of a cannon. I've done this. How do I top it the next time? So it becomes more about the spectacle, and Thor's character just wants to get out of it. And of course, there's a love interest in there, and there's a little surprise about close to halfway through the movie that comes in. and it's just a really fun. And we got, I mean, like, one of the funny. I'll give you two glimpses of a couple like the really funniest scenes and characters. Joey Fatone plays the worship leader, and one of the funniest characters in the whole thing. I mean, hilarious, nailed it. I mean, just it. Yeah, very, very fun. So that's a strong, fun, funny supporting character. And then even though they were only there for part of a day, we actually got Billy Baldwin and China Phillips on camera as husband and wife, the first time they've ever played husband and wife on camera. And they play these uber spiritual, new agey parents of one of the kids in the youth group. And that scene is one of the funniest scenes in the whole movie. So funny.
Awesome.
So anyway, it's about this youth pastor who wants to get back to preaching the gospel like he and his senior pastor started out doing in the beginning when they had a very small congregation. And it's about the redemptive arc of those characters and those stories, and throw in a love interest and throw in some zany comedy. And, you know, Donald Faison from Scrubs plays his manager, agent, kind of sleazy kind of guy. And it's very fun. There's a lot of fun people. If you see the proof of concept and want to know who from the proof of concept is in the movie, Thor's in the movie as the lead, and Michael Monks was the senior pastor in the proof of concept. Shout out to Michael Monks. He was also the senior pastor in the feature. So those two actors made it to the feature. And Michael Monks was also the on-set acting coach because he teaches acting.
Okay.
So
awesome.
So very fun. If you want to see the proof of concept, you can just type into YouTube Thor Ramsey Youth Group, or again, go to my YouTube channel, CSS301, and you'll find it in like the comedy playlist, or you'll find it somewhere in there. So and let me make this clear. Okay. That's not actually the trailer for the real movie. That was the proof of concept that was instrumental in getting the real movie made. Hopefully by the time your audience hears this podcast, the trailer for the real movie will be public, but I don't have specific details on that at this time, at the time of recording.
Oh, wait, we almost forgot to talk about Something Smells Funny, which is something that my wife says after every meal to me.
Oh, no.
So tell us about Something Smells Funny, and is there a release date expected for it?
Not that I'm aware of. So I've been working with comedian Scott Wood and pediatrician Dr. Watson. That's his real name, Dr. Watson, Tim Watson, since 2012. Thor and I were working on a 168 film project in 2012 called How I Met My Father, which is on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And if you have Amazon Prime Video, it's free to watch. It's called How I Met My Father, so you can check that out there. It might also be on Creative Motion Network. I'm not sure. I think it might be. But Scott Wood is a comedian and impressionist,
Mr.
and he and Thor had done gigs together and stuff. And Thor invited him on the shoot to play one of the thugs. So small supporting character. He was there one day. And so, but he ended up enjoying the experience so much, and he enjoyed his time there so much that his kid's pediatrician, Dr. Watson, who he's also like best friends with, Dr. Watson approached him at one point and was like, you know, there's some pet peeves that I'd like to address, but I really want to do it in a lighthearted, comical way and not be mean-spirited about it at all. I want to address some issues that keep occurring in the clinic. So etiquette issues, right? Mm-hmm. And so in 2012, we did our very first collab called Pediatric Clinic. You can also see that on my YouTube channel. You can see it on Dr. Watson's YouTube channel. Dr. Watson's is youtube.com/c/Dr. Watson. So anyway, so I started collaborating with them in 2012, and then like every couple years-ish, we would do something on location that's like new sketches and stuff that's either addressing patient etiquette or other provider etiquette. Like there's one we did called PC2, and that one addresses provider etiquette and patient etiquette. It's kind of like across the board. And so we've done multiple on location productions that are just kind of goofy, over the top, sort of industrial comedies, so to speak. And so anyway, Scott Wood had this great idea for a comedy cooking show where a guest comedian comes on and shows us how to make a dish, and then they talk comedy, and some of them are actors too, so they talk comedy and acting, but it's funny, and it's in front of a live audience. And so Dr. Watson loved the idea, and he's like, hey, let's incorporate healthy cooking into it. So the comedians that come on, they're gonna show us how to make a healthy dish, because he's trying to fight things like childhood obesity and stuff like that. And so let's do a happy mix of all that. So last year, 2019 August, we did a handful of new sketches that aren't released yet, but I think it's close. I think it's very, very close that we'll be releasing those. And actually, who knows? They might be released by the time of this recording, or by the time of the airing of this recording. But the other thing we did was we did the comedy cooking show. We did basically an extended pilot. Typically, when you do something to see how it's, you do a pilot episode for like a sitcom or whatever. We did 4. We did 4 episodes, and over the course of a couple of days. And we had on one episode we had Bobby Collins. On another episode we had Jimmy Brogan. On another episode we had Mark Christopher Lawrence, and then we finished off with Victoria Jackson.
Okay. And
so very funny. I mean, and Scott Wood as the host of that show, hilarious. Nailed it. He was so in his element. And if you know anything about those 4 different comedians, they're different personalities, different styles, and he accommodated accordingly to each and every one of them. I mean, he was fabulous. So shout out to Scott Wood, shout out to executive producer Dr. Watson. I believe they're in the process of pitching it to networks. There's been a couple of meetings, and it's been maybe a month or 2 since I've had a solid update, so we'll see. But hopefully that goes forward in some fashion, whether a company, like sponsors it or a network picks it up or something like that. We definitely are interested in doing more of those.
Both of those shows are the film and then the show. I believe they both have their own Facebook page, so we'll have that linked so that
that is correct. Facebook.com/something smells funny is that one. The Church People one is still under the Youth Group Movie name on Facebook, because that's what it was called years and years ago.
Okay.
So it's facebook.com/Youth Group Movie. So feel free to go there and like and so forth, and keep your eyes peeled. If you want to see the cast and crew for the Church People movie, you can just go to imdb.com, Internet Movie Database, imdb.com, and type in Church People. And or type in Thor's name or my name, and you'll see it listed somewhere, and you can see the cast and crew for that one. And be looking out for that one, hopefully early 2021. And then one more I want to shout out to. I want to give a big shout out to Timothy Buck and Barry McKenna. We're working on a pilot for a sitcom called Open Mic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a TV sitcom in development, and the log line for it is New York stand-up comic and new Christian convert Mike McKenna, fresh from rehab and ready for his big break gig in LA, is waylaid when he and his family are stranded in a foreign country, deep East Texas. So it's very fun, and we do have a letter of intent from Victoria Jackson to be a recurring supporting character on it, one of the main cast. Comedian Barry McKenna is playing Mike, and we're like I said, it's in development. We're hoping to raise funds soon for a possible pilot shoot sometime next year, and we've been reaching out to other name talent that we can't really announce yet, but so it's very much in process, but It's a fun one. It's a fun one with a lot of fun characters. And I mean, just think of Victoria Jackson in a sitcom, for crying out loud. And, and the Facebook page for that one is facebook.com/open mic sitcom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to the featured video, there's a video of comedian Barry McKenna, who plays Mike McKenna in the sitcom. It's called Denomination Song. It's a very fun song.
Oh, yeah.
So here's another way you can help support. If you watch that and you think it's funny, share. Share.
Absolutely. And we'll have those links so that everyone can find those in our show notes. So wherever you're listening, you should be able to scroll down a little bit further. You'll find every link that you need to find the different productions, and also check out Christopher's IMDb page and see all the different things he's been attached to, and links to the upcoming productions.
Yeah, there's so much we didn't get to cover. I don't want people to feel slighted, like other projects I'm attached to and other names. I mean, big shout out to Jamie A. Hope and Peace at Home, Jerry Della Sala, Susan Shearer. I mean, like a whole bunch of stuff we didn't get to talk about. So I don't want anybody to feel slighted or anything.
Yeah, so that would be my fault because I talked too much about stuff that I was experiencing and not enough about what Christopher's been doing. So don't get mad at Christopher. Send the hate mail to me.
Well, the other thing is, too, these interviews go so quick.
Yes.
And it's so easy to just ramble on about one thing, and then 20 minutes has passed. I mean, imagine if this was a half hour. I mean, have you done a radio interview for a half hour before?
I've done, yeah. I've
Holy
either hosted
crikey.
or been on the other side. Yeah,
and then they have commercial spots that take up 3 to 5 minutes. It's great, and then you're done.
Yeah,
and so it's so easy if you're attached to a bunch of stuff. It's so easy to not mention somebody's name or whatever. So please forgive me if I've completely blanked on something or whatever. It didn't come up. It's not entirely Dave's fault. It's just it. You can literally talk about stuff for days sometimes, and it just depends on the topic. So,
absolutely. You understand now why they start playing the music at the awards shows, because it's you can't thank everybody from your mom until the last person you worked with.
My story goes all the way back to the womb. We don't have time for that story.
Well, they created a new invention to help keep where the baby is and the mother really clean. It's an automatic vacuum called a Woomba.
Ba-dum-bum.
Thank you very much. I am not on Scott Wood's level, nor Thor Ramsey, so.
Clearly.
So the last two segments I always do with my guests, and I'm sorry to keep you so long, but
wait, there's more.
Yes, there's more.
This is definitely a Merry Christmas surprise, isn't it?
Yes. So the first segment we do is called the interrogation. I have 7 random questions, things that wouldn't fit any other place in the interview, just as a way to kind of get to know you and maybe to stump you.
Oh, okay.
So
and thankfully you can edit this, so
yes.
All
right, first question. I know you're born in Ohio and you have lived in California for quite a while, but who's your team?
Again, a loaded question. Okay, the long story short, I'm not into sports.
Okay.
A lot of time I don't even know what sports season it is. But, obviously, Ohio State Buckeyes. And, growing up, my dad loved the Dallas Cowboys. So I loved the Dallas Cowboys. So there you go.
Perfect.
Ohio State Buckeyes, Dallas Cowboys.
All right, question number 2. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you want to move?
I like California. But I again, loaded. I have to think about it. I really have to think about it, because there might be some exotic place that just might be beautiful. You see, every once in a while, you'll see something incredibly beautiful on LinkedIn or something that is just wow, where's that? So I don't know. I mean, but I like California.
All right, question number 3. What is your favorite food?
Pizza.
What toppings?
Pepperoni, extra cheese.
I would have hung up if you said pineapple, so we're good there.
Oh, that's not. Oh, that is not a pizza topping. Thank you very much.
Question.
I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean,
Right.
come on.
Question number 4. What's the best faith-based production you've seen?
Okay, so here we get into nuanced territory as well, because I very rarely have a favorite thing, except for favorite food, pizza. That's one of them. That's like I could literally probably eat that every day. I don't, thankfully, but I probably could. But so when we get to other topics that I don't have a favorite for, I have to say some of my favorites, and again, I might miss some. But I will say that one of the best, and I'm talking execution, acting, story, one of the best faith-based movies I've seen is The Case for Christ.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
I don't think that's the best title for the movie. I mean, I get it; it's after the book, but I mean, like, I could see how that title might like kind of turn people off or make them think, oh, it's just It is a very well done movie. The production design, the acting, the casting, the writing. Brian Bird wrote it. I mean, like, it's just incredible. So that's one of my favorites. One of the best ones.
Awesome. All right, question number 5. What's the last scripture that either challenged or changed you?
Oh my god. Oh my golly. Oh my golly. Challenged or changed me. Why couldn't you say what's your favorite scripture? I mean, I at least have a better answer for that. I don't know. I don't know about the challenge or change me. I'd have to really think about that. But I can tell you the scriptures that I think I'm most responsive to are the scriptures that communicate Jesus's compassion. So, for example, I believe it's Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's one of my favorites. Certainly not the only one. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. That's John 3:16 and 17. Yeah. So, I mean, those are a couple of my favorites. But so I think I'm the most moved to want to change by the ones that express Jesus's heart of compassion and love and grace and mercy.
Awesome. Now, question number 6 is, if you could play any role as an actor, what role or what character have you dreamt of playing or would love to play?
Okay, talk about type and like believability. I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm probably a superhero. I don't like I mean, I'm certainly not in shape for this right now, but like a Superman or something like that. I mean, just like those are iconic, characters. Yeah, probably a superhero.
Okay. Final question of the interrogation. As a director, if money and time are no object whatsoever, who would you most like to cast in a production and work with?
So this is another favorite question that I don't have a favorite answer to. However, let me preface it by saying this. I have found that it's really important in collaborations to be like-minded and on the same page. And there may be some, I mean, like, for example, if I say a name, like Harrison Ford, like, wow, how incredible would that be to work with Harrison Ford? As far as we know. But if I come to find out that Harrison Ford is a jerk to work with, then my answer is going to, you know what I'm saying? So, right. So I would say, some of the ideal ones, like, I think it would be incredible to work with somebody like Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford, possibly Tom Hanks, Gary Oldman. I mean, wow, what a talent. Oh my golly. Yeah. So, huge list. I mean, some are supporting characters that you wouldn't know the names if I said them, and some are the A-listers that practically everybody knows their name.
Yeah.
But so that it's another loaded question, man. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't have a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
There's a list of people I hope that I am blessed with the opportunity to work with, and it's a great experience.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So the final question of every.
Wait, I thought the last one was the final one. What are you doing here? Oh no, that was the last one of the interrogation.
Right.
Got it. This isn't the interrogation. All right, so we're moving on to greener pastures then?
Yes, greener pastures.
Okay.
And in many ways, you addressed it earlier in our conversation, but straight out, for anybody that's looking to either get into filmmaking or in general use their gifts for God's glory, what would your wise counsel be for somebody that's in that place?
So this is my advice, and this advice is, of course, preempted if God tells you otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to preface it with that. If God tells you otherwise, then pay no attention to my advice. But my advice is plain and simple, and we talked about it before, and that is, you don't have to sit and wait for the phone to ring nowadays. There is so much you can do okay, let me just give you the 168 Film Project as an example. If you're not familiar with the 168 Film Project and know they are not paying me to do this, I don't get any referral fees. It's just such a phenomenal experience. Go to 168film.com, I think is their website. They have if you're a screenwriter or want to be a screenwriter, they have something called the Rite of Passage. And that happens around October each year, I think. So I believe the one that they recently had one. So next year around fall time, if they still do it, then you got the Rite of Passage, and that's spelled WRITE, Rite of Passage. Nice little pun there. But I mean, like, and they have multiple categories now. You can do documentary style. You can take a past or Rite of Passage film and produce that. You can do what they call a speed film, which is what I've done the most with a 168. And the way that works is like, there's a certain night called Verse Assignment Night, and there's a theme for the year. So for example, Skip Listening, if you see that one, our theme for that year was Hearing God. That was our theme. And then there was a certain night called Verse Assignment Night where each team randomly selects a Bible verse. They have these rocks in the shape of a cross, and you pick up a rock, and the verse that's under that rock is your verse, and it somehow relates to the theme. And then once you get that verse, then you can start brainstorming story and like what is the script. Like at that point you can start. You have about 10 or 11 days to do that. And then it moves immediately into the 168 hours, which is 7 days, to shoot, edit, turn in a finished short film. And it's usually up to 10 or 11 minutes, including credits.
Wow.
It's varied from year to year. So Skip Listening was one of those films. That was my very first professional-looking short film, my very first collaboration with Thor Ramsey. Skip Listening, it was a 168 Film Project. We had 10 or 11 days to iron out the story and script, and then we moved immediately into, and of course, your casting and stuff during that time if you don't already have the cast on board, which we've done it that way before too. The following year, we did 2 Westerns, and we had most of the cast, if not all the cast, on board before we went in. That's a challenging way to do it because you don't know what your story and script are yet.
Right.
So if you have a cast already select, but you don't know what your story and script are yet because you haven't gotten your verse yet to then brainstorm off of, it can be very complicated. But you have 10, 11 days to write, pre-produce, cast, and get ready for the 168. And then the clock starts ticking. 168 hours. Shoot, edit, turn in. Phenomenal experience, especially if your short is well received. People like it, and then all of a sudden, people want to start working with you. I mean, that's more or less a very monumental, significant part of how my filmmaking career started, was participating in the 168 competition, going to the festival, which is usually in Burbank or somewhere in Southern California, going to the festival, connecting with people. You see somebody else's short you like, getting to know them. They see your short. If they like it, they want to get to know you. People, and then the other is social media. Share your work on social media.
Yeah.
People will want to work with you if they like what they see, knowing nothing else about you. People want to start working. It happened to me, like famous people, non-famous people, pastors, famous pastors. I mean, it varied in what I was asking for, but sometimes I was simply asking, will you please share this?
Yeah.
And one of those people replied, how do I talk to the person, involved in this to like, how can I best support your project? And that person came on board as a producer and an actor. I like to say it's a lot of who you know, but not in the nepotism kind of sense. It's not like, well, I don't have any family in the industry, so I can't do it. No, it's who you know in a different context. It's like, who do you know that you click with, or there could be a potential collaboration there, and that's what's like, if you're a YouTube creator, that's why one of the big things that helps people's channels is if they can do a collaboration with another YouTuber. They call them collabs. If you can do a collab with another YouTuber, that helps momentum grow on each channel, because people from one audience are seeing content from that they wouldn't have seen otherwise unless they were in a collab effort and sharing their respective content. So it's similar with filmmaking. It's similar with acting. I mean, it's so easy nowadays with social media to get in front of somebody.
Yeah.
It's so easy. So you want to do it respectful. You want to do it nice. You don't want to hound or badger somebody. But again, they don't know you exist if they don't know you exist. They don't know your work if they don't know your work. It's so much easier to get your work in front of them now. So do something that's well done, whether it's a monologue or a scene with, another competent actor, and showcase your work, or whether, it's a proof of concept for like, hey, I'd love to make this movie. No idea how we're going to fund this thing, because, I don't have the money. How are we going to do this? If you can, shoot a compelling, fun proof of concept, and you'll get people's attention. And I annoyed a lot of people with that proof of concept. I'm just going to be blunt. I did. People were tired of me sharing that on Facebook, but I shared it for like 2.5 years on Facebook. I shared it on Twitter. I specifically reached out to people on Twitter, like at so-and-so. And I don't think I repeatedly did that to the same people. I mean, be careful, you don't want to hound like the same person over and over again, but some people will respond, some won't. Some people will be able to help, some won't. Some people will simply share it. Again, there's that share concept. If you like it, share.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you don't know who in that audience is going to see it, who might be able to help.
Yeah. And we're so connected to social media. If you get one person to share it, they may not be connected to the right person, but they may be connected to the person that is connected to the right person. And it's
let me share a real quick story about that. I was helping producer Gary Emmerich do a short film. We collaborated on a short film called One Night Stand, and it's literally about the Bible and the nightstand and how it changed a person's life. But it's a comedy, and Thor Ramsey starred in it. And so anyway, we did a crowdfunding campaign to shoot that. And then at the time I did have a full-time job, and I was able to put a chunk of money in. But I mean, the crowdfunding campaign was a relatively small campaign, but we had plateaued at like a certain amount, and we needed upwards of maybe just shy of $4,000 to get across. And we had 12 or 13 days left in the campaign. And actress Jen Gotzon let me share our Kickstarter campaign on her Facebook walls. She had like a business wall and a personal wall. So I wasn't even connected to this person who contributed, but somebody from that share in her audience contributed $4,000.
Wow.
that got us over. I get this text out of the blue in the morning, like we're plateaued for days at like, 2,000 something, and like it's just and I'm spending like hours and hours like messaging people and like, hey, can I mean, if you've ever crowdfunded before, it's like a full-time job.
Yeah.
And we're just plateaued, and I wake up one day and I get this text from Gary Emmerich. Shout out to Gary, and he's like, "We're funded," and I'm like,
Wow.
Like what? We've been plateaued at 2,000 for like days. Like, what do you mean we're funded? Somebody gave $4,000. Somebody
Nice.
I didn't know. Somebody I don't think Gary Emmerich knew, but it was shared on Jen Gotson's wall. It was somebody in her audience, and this person came on, and he got an executive producer credit as a result of it. But he was connected to Jen Gotson because if I remember correctly, I believe he funded a feature film that she was in. So he knew her, and she wasn't even involved in this project. She just let me share it on her wall. I got to tell you, dude, the biggest contributions that crowdfunding campaigns I've been a part of have come from people I've never met in person.
Wow. Nice.
They're just Facebook friends, or in that instance, they're a Facebook friend of a Facebook friend. It doesn't hurt to ask, Share.
Jesus said, knock and the door will be opened. And James, in different context, said, you have not because you ask not.
Yeah.
And I know it's different context, but still the concept is, don't be afraid. The worst they're going to say is no. They're not going to eat your children.
Yeah. Can I share one more quick story?
Sure.
From the acting days? So actors can relate to this one. So I'm in college. I'm a freshman in college, and I'm studying acting. That's my major. That's what I want to do. And I find out that the local news station wants to shoot a commercial in a dorm room. And because the RA of my dorm knew that I was an acting major, he pointed them to my room to scout. Well, I was scheduled for an acting class that day at that time, and lo and behold, either the class didn't happen or we got out early. Either way, I got back to the room at the same time that they were going to scout it. I was there. And they're looking at it like, yeah. And we had kind of a different setup because I had a roommate, and we sort of created a loft out of our bed. So it was kind of like a bunk bed situation. So I think they liked that look. And so they scouted out the room. They liked it. And I'm standing there thinking, should I ask them, do you have actors cast for this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I asked, I said, do you have actors for this? And obviously I wanted to have a shot. And they said, well, we're going through your theater department. And I said, I'm in the theater department. And so they let me audition that day. They came back, I think, later. I auditioned that day, and I got the part. It was my very first commercial. It was a local-ish commercial.
Mm-hmm.
But what was really cool about it was a wide enough area that people that I grew up with and went to junior high and high school with actually saw it in the county that I grew up in, because it was only like an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
So like people who had no idea that I was in this thing, and then it finally airs, and it played for a while. But I opened my mouth and I asked.
Yeah.
Now, if I'd have just stood there and let them look at the room, they might have used my room to shot in. They would have gone through somebody else at the theater department who probably would have suggested somebody else to audition, and I probably wouldn't have gotten a part.
Yeah.
I opened my mouth and I asked. I mean, so there's an example for an actor.
Yeah.
You
Don't
don't know unless you ask, and as long as you're respectful and kind and you're not badgering somebody, in my opinion, it doesn't hurt to ask, and that's a classic example right there.
And when you ask, and if you're polite and respectful, they may be no at that point.
Yeah.
But they may remember the positive experience, and then later they're like, oh, I remember this guy.
That is absolutely true, and I have heard story after story of that happening.
Awesome. Well, Christopher Sean Shaw of the Christopher Sean Show.
No, it's the Sean Shaw's Show.
Oh, God, I'm trying to get your first name in there. I'm sorry.
Okay, now, I really want to hear you try to do it. Say The Sean Shaw Show Show.
The Sean Shaw Show Show.
Yeah, say it 5 times.
The Sean Show.
Yeah.
The Sean Shaw Show. All right, that's it. I'm going to link to it in the notes.
The Sean Shaw Show Show. 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 The Sean Shaw Show Show.
Where he sells seashells on the seashore.
Yeah, exactly. Don't even ask me that one.
All right, man. It's been a blast. Nobody's going to hear it because it's going to be edited out, but there was a storm that blew through, so thanks for hanging out and make sure we can finish this out. I hope you're blessed. I hope that people will really watch and enjoy the films that you've done and be looking for the new stuff coming out because they're all fun. I really enjoyed seeing Wireless on Creative Motion Network. Really enjoyed seeing Skip Listening. Finally got to see that this past summer. Caught it on, I think it was on 24Flix, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, they're fun and they're uplifting, and I think that, like you said earlier, they're, especially with Skip Listening, there's a really good message, kind of like Esther, where God's not really mentioned, but you can kind of see that God is part of the story.
Yeah, God's mentioned once, but it's a very redemptive film, and I don't know if I mentioned this or not. We have a feature-length version of the script as well. Just needs funding, So we'd love to make a feature out of that one.
Absolutely, definitely. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have all these links in the show notes. And just be blessed, and hope that 2021 is a much better year for you and for your family. No more fires.
Amen.
Amen.